Hello, Ryan. A thought on being half Asian. I recently heard of the concept of being double. So I can say that I am both Japanese and American, both Asian and white, not just half. Regarding the process of looking at colleges for Lex, if you could take your best guess, what do you think the main factors of consideration are for you, Alicia, and for Lex? I know it might be impossible to know for sure, but what are those factors and criteria that each of you is considering most strongly, like cost, location, an area of study, etc.? You referred to reading the book Upstream. I think reading is such a valuable asset for you to be open to new ideas and continually hearing from experts and the most intelligent and talented people in the world anytime you want. So I'm glad that you're a library guy and audio book and book guy to add to your Renaissance man list of DIY guy, softball guy, outdoorsman guy, and family guy, etc. I hope you add to your abilities and expertise, and I hope that you and your family keep reading because you need quality input in order to make more informed and valuable output. I also agree that we were lucky to have the childhood that we had. We were safe, we had involved parents, and had plenty of opportunities. I also think that it would have been nice to diversify my talents and interests to activities beyond sports, and I didn't really take a deep look into any new worlds or interests until after university when I started traveling and meeting people from different countries. Sports will always be a part of my identity, but yes, the greater the variety of experiences children have, generally, the higher the likelihood is to find their passion and at least be more well-rounded and learn what they do and don't like to do. And I think you and Allie are on the right path in fully supporting your kids no matter what they choose as their passion. So, we both married women who are from very different places. Allie is from Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a lot different from Oregon. Ayong is from Korea. Korea is a lot different from the US, let alone Oregon. Getting to know the parents-in-law allows you to understand someone's family, culture, upbringing, and roots of their personality traits. Fortunately for you, you speak the same language as your in-laws, and it's great that you're getting involved in somewhat of a different culture. And when you know a lot about where Allie comes from, you can understand her on a deeper level. For me, I don't speak much Korean, so there's the boundary of language in addition to culture and geography. I did spend 1 year in Korea, and I have spent a significant amount of time with my in-laws, given the obstacles. So you asked, what have you learned about your in-laws that have taught you about your wife? So, 우리 어머니, my mother-in-law. Oma is a bit over-dramatic, bordering between loving concern and over-involvement. She is a people-pleaser who loves to help, and she makes delicious food for those she loves. 우리 아버지, my father-in-law. Appa is very quiet and stoic. He's a military man who loves to read, and he's very thoughtful and fairly progressive considering his background of being an older Korean male. Ayong is very independent, diligent, considerate, cautious, perceptive, resolute, assertive, and caring. I see a lot of those traits in her parents. Another revealing feature is the way she interacts with her parents and her siblings. This tells me a whole different side to her that I don't see often when it's just us, because her family is Korean, so the culture is different, She's super close with all of her family, and I can't really speak much of the language. So seeing their day-to-day interactions gives me a better understanding of her and a little of how Koreans and Americans are different. Ayoung grew up in an environment where education was extremely important, going to school for sometimes 10 or 12 hours a day, and sometimes even on the weekends. You can't talk about Korea without talking about education. You can easily sense in the atmosphere that prominent universities and huge chaebols, or giant corporations like Samsung, are dominant fixtures in people's awareness. So a big difference is the constant awareness of where you are on the social hierarchy and the high level of competition in everything. Also, their family moved several times when Ayoung was young because her dad's military position required those moves. Another big difference is that Ayoung grew up in Seoul, which is one of the biggest cities in the world, and their motto is Bali Bali, or quick quick. In contrast, school for me was important, but certainly not the dominant part of my childhood. I played a lot more sports and had significantly more free time. I never felt much pressure to get good grades or to get into a good university. I lived in one small town my whole childhood, and Seoul is bigger than New York City, whereas Bend has just 55,000 people, or at least they had 55,000 people in 2001, back when you graduated high school. So from my perspective, Ayoung's calendar was usually more filled, and her life path had more limited acceptable routes, whereas I had relatively more choice and more options, both for what I was going to do on a typical weekend and the bigger things like what I was going to do for a living. So getting back to my in-laws, aside from treating Ayoung well, I think what's most important to Oma is that I agree with her and that I eat a lot of what she makes, which I try to do as much as possible, so I think we get along fairly well. But she always has the right answers and the best advice, and it can be frustrating for her not to be able to clearly communicate that to me. And Appa is so quiet that even if I did speak fluent Korean, I don't think we would chat too often. But he doesn't seem cold by any means. He's introverted and he loves to read and speak slowly like I do, so I think that we enjoy each other's calm and quiet presence because the other 3 family members are opinionated women. But I can tell sometimes there are things he wishes he could articulate better to me with his limited English and my limited Korean. Often I end up hearing the fuller context of the conversation hours or days after they take place. So that's definitely one of my biggest insecurities, not being able to speak Korean well. 저는 한국어 할 수 없어요. 미안합니다. It's frustrating for them since it's unrealistic to learn English at such an old age, but Appa tries to speak English and does what he can, which I really respect. And I really stagnated after studying Korean for a few years. It's really different from English and it's difficult, but that shouldn't prevent me from actively trying to learn. But it's frustrating for me to put in an effort and not see much result, so I feel embarrassed and guilty sometimes, and I'm reluctant to start learning again because I have some shame and fear of failure. Overall, our relationship is pretty good. Ayoung acts as a nice interpreter most of the time, but our relationship could be much more efficient if I stepped up my Korean skills. So, based on my experience with my in-laws, I've learned the importance of being able to adapt and compromise. And also that, beyond the superficial appearance of things, we're all human. Despite the barriers and differences, They have problems just like we do. They love their families just like we do. They are perfectly normal sometimes and a little ridiculous at other times, just like the Bigelows and Hamadas. You also asked about our future plans. So Ayang is extremely close with her family, and I would love to be closer to you and to mom and dad. So I think we'll make a strong effort to move to either Korea or the US in 2 years when my contract ends. But we'll see what happens. I think Ayang and her family have more ups and downs than we do, but that comes with their constant interaction. It would be really nice to have family nearby to increase the availability of those you trust and love the most. So I hope we can make that happen. All right. So my question for you is, outside of our family, who are some people from your childhood or as a young adult who have significantly impacted you? Similar to the Power of Moments book, have there been role models or have there been specific moments that you have not forgotten, that you look back on from time to time, that you can trace how they have influenced who you are today? All right, I look forward to your answer.